come to chapter 6. And chapter 6 kind of begins, I kind of interpret this to be a commentary over the years that we read through in chapter 5 with the genealogy, that 1,000 years between Adam, the creation, and then the birth of Noah, 10,056 years. And so we see the beginning of chapter 6 here is this recap and telling us a little bit more in detail of what was going on in this time period, and that kind of gives us a little more information into like Enoch, who we know from Jude was prophesying. And so there was some bad stuff going on, and then the beginning of chapter 6 is about to fill us in on that, just how bad it really was. So chapter 6 verse 1 says this: when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them. So this is pretty much from the beginning. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive. Okay, so right off the bat, in verse 2, we're getting into a very interesting passage. It's like, well, okay, how do we understand this? Okay, so the phrase "sons of God," and in the Old Testament, we see the phrase "sons of God" used a couple of different ways. We can interpret this "sons of God," meaning this is, basically the descendants of Adam, the descendants of. Some scholars would classify these people as the descendants of Seth, in particular, through his line, because we see it's Seth, his line, that we have like the godly line through these different people of Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, down to Noah. So we see that it could be referring to Sethites, the sons of God, or some people interpret the sons of God being this is like fallen angels, in this sense, and that's, I guess, plausible too, especially in context. But I think I'm going to lean more to a more logical understanding that this is probably talking about Seth's descendants, and how instead of following after God, because we see that Enoch walks with God, and we'll see in just a second that Noah walks with God, but the rest of these people were definitely not walking with God, and they were walking in wickedness and lusting after women instead of following after God. So the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. So more than likely, some people interpret it to be like angels and ladies are having kids. More likely, this is men who should have been godly, walking with God, were instead just saying, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'll marry who I want to marry. I don't care how they are, if they're following after God, if they have a heart for God. I just want to do what I want to do. And I think that's probably what was happening at this time period. Verse 3, then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. So we see God begin to change and plan to change how things are happening within his creation. We've seen Methuselah live to 969 years, like almost 1,000 years lifespan, and now we see this change that's coming about, reducing the lifespan of humanity, and we'll see that happens because of the events of chapter 7 and what's going on there. Verse 4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward were when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So this is where you get that, well, maybe these sons of God here is talking about, maybe it's some kind of spirit being, or they're getting powers by having these unnatural relations with women, and now we've got these mighty men of old being born. Really understanding that word Nephilim is difficult. A lot of Bibles translate it to giants. I think King James translates it to giants, and that's probably a better understanding, is because we have to understand, like we looked last time in chapter 5 with the lineage going down from Adam all the way to Noah. And then, as we'll see in chapter 7, that Noah and his descendants are the only ones that survive. It's a much more limited gene pool than existed pre-flood. So this is probably more in reference to there was just there was giants. There was people that were a little bit different than we are today because we don't have those genetic traits. Could it be that angels and ladies had relations? Maybe. It's one of those things where you just kind of have to make your best interpretation at it. And I would lean this is probably the more logical thing is that this is just men who are seeking after what they want and not what God wants. They're hungry for power, fueled by pride, and not walking with God. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. They were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So these are definitely, like, you wonder where the Greek god legends come from, and all these different things, Hercules and all that. This is coming from a pre-flood time of stuff that's happening, and these are the people of renown, people of old. Okay, verse 5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And that's really the key to understanding what's happened on this earth after Adam and Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They are experiencing pain and suffering and evil. And it is a disease that has spread all over the known earth at this time, right? This is just, everyone is doing, kind of skipping forward a little ways to the book of Judges, what's right in their own eyes. But that's exactly what we see here. It's basically, this is the pattern that we see repeated throughout the Bible. And understanding is that we're not good people. We're not good. We always choose to walk away from God and choose to do what we want to do in our flesh. That's the nature of our flesh, is to do what we want to do. And it's only when we have relationship with Jesus that He restores and changes us from the inside out. Not that we're conforming on the outside in, but that He changes us from the inside out. So the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Oh, wow. The world at this point, it's 1,000 years old. It is completely messed up. It is completely messed up. Verse 6, and the Lord was sorry that He had made man on the earth, and it grieved Him to His heart. Now, does this mean that God had no idea this was going to happen? No. God knew this was going to happen. God knew this was going to happen before He made the first creative anything. Before He spoke, let the heavens and the earth into existence. He knew this was going to happen. Still, He did it anyways, out of His love for us. And we'll see that even these people are continually thinking in their hearts just evil. It's evil, evil all the time. We still see that God, it hurts, but He loves us. Where He could just completely have just been like, all right, we're done. He doesn't. Almost. But He doesn't. Verse 7, so the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and the birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. So verse 7 is very scary. Here's God saying, all right, we're going to start from scratch. But, there's a verse 8, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And that go back to Lamech, his dad, and the name Noah that was given him back in chapter 5. Remember, this is out of the ground the Lord has cursed. This one shall bring us relief from our work and from painful toils of our hands. God found favor in Noah. Verse 9. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. So we get to find and see why Noah has favor with God, because in this time of such wickedness, when man is only continually thinking wicked and wanting wicked things, here stands Noah, a righteous man who is walking with God, a man that loves God and gives him his heart. Just like we saw with Enoch, he walked with God, and now we see that Noah is the one walking with God. Verse 10, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. Okay? So we've kind of shifted in chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. We kind of have the kind of overview of what's been going on until we get down to Noah, right? Who's found favor in the sight of the Lord. And then in verse 9, we have the shift really to the Noah story. So now the story is more specifically about Noah. And so we find a little more detail here that the earth is corrupt and it's filled with violence. People are hurting people. People are killing people and destroying God's. It's bad. It's violent, and the earth is now corrupt. A lot of times we think, oh man, our world today is really messed up. And it is. And it is. How much worse was it in the day of Noah? We haven't seen what it was like in the days of Noah. There's bad stuff that happens now. It was far worse than Noah's day, in my opinion. Verse 13, and God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So God is talking to Noah and says, listen, I'm going to destroy everybody. Pretty much the earth. Verse 14, make yourself an ark of gopher wood. We have no idea what gopher wood is. Some type of wood. Apparently it floats really well and does well to seal out water. Make rooms in the ark. Cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits. Its breadth, 50 cubits. And its height, 30 cubits. Okay, so a cubit is basically a unit of measurement, and generally determined from the tip of your finger to your elbow, which for us is about 18 inches, so about 1.5 foot is kind of that idea of a cubit. Now, and we could calculate this to be, so the length of the ark, 450 feet, so that's 450 feet. A football field is 300 feet, 100 yards. So a football field and a half long. It's 50 cubits wide, which would make it 150 feet wide. Okay, it's pretty wide, right? And then the height of it is 30 cubits, which you're looking at 90 feet tall. So you've got this big box that Noah is now instructed to build, and we'll see why he's instructed to build this big box in just a second. Make a roof for the ark and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh in which is the breath of life under heaven. Okay, so now we see that Noah is building this vessel because God is going to flood the world. And so he's giving the specific instructions for its size. And those dimensions that we gave about it being 150 or 450 feet long, 150 feet wide, that's based on our size today. It's quite possible, like going back to that word Nephilim or giants, right? It could have been that Noah and his kids were not averaging 6 feet. They could have been averaging, 9 feet. It's not till later in the book of Samuel that we see this guy come along by the name of Goliath, who is an actual giant, right? So, and it's possible that there are giants, taller people, because we're talking about a pre-flood world. The world is vastly different. There's a lot of people with a lot of different theories because, number one, people are living a lot longer at this time period. And it's in part due to genetics, but it's probably in part due to the makeup of how the world was. They're not getting probably the UV radiation and damage like we get. Like today, if we go out in the sun, if you're not putting sunscreen on, you're probably going to get sunburned. At that time period, it's probably completely different. The skin damage is not going to be there because of the UV rays. It's totally different. So it's kind of hard to grasp between the two times because they're so vastly different because of what's about to happen in this crazy change. It's about to happen on the earth because there's several things that aren't normal yet, right? We remember that, when God created it, there was no rain. There was this mist. It hasn't rained yet. Rain hasn't. The flood happens at 1656. 1656 years, and it has never rained. People this time are still vegetarians. That doesn't, the world's pretty wicked. They might be eating meat, but they're not instructed to do so until after they come off the ark. So there are some major differences that happen before they go onto the ark and after. And we see that God earlier in verse 6 has said, listen, things are about to change. Man is not going to live as long as he used to live. So things are radically going to change. Okay? And so I'll bring a flood, verse 17, I'll bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. So understanding that the flood waters is going to kill everything that breathes oxygen. Okay? The fish, they are going to be just fine in the water. What about saltwater, freshwater fish? It's probably all freshwater before the flood. Probably not going to get the mineral deposits to cause the saltwater oceans that we have today. The world did not look probably like it looks today back then, with how we have, in science we have tectonic plates and all these different things. The world was vastly different. The mountains that we have today are probably not like, they weren't like they were then. They were probably much flatter. And post-flood, we'll see some radical geologic shifts in to where we have mountains and we have inland bodies of water and all these different things that are a direct result of the flood. So we find that God's going to flood the earth and everything that breathes oxygen is going to die. So that means the majority of your insects, they're going to be fine. They don't breathe oxygen like we breathe oxygen. They can survive, floating on water forever, almost forever, right? But everything that breathes oxygen, man, animals, land animals, not so well. Whales, dolphins, they're going to be okay in the water. Verse 18, but I will establish my covenant with you. God is establishing a covenant, a promise with Noah. Now, this is the first covenant we've seen so far, that God is making a promise. Not just this promise that we see back in Genesis 3:15, that he's going to make things right again by one of Eve's descendants, but now we have an actual covenant being made between God and man. specifically God and Noah. He says, I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons. So we've got Noah, his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, your wife, so Noah's wife, who's not named, and your sons' wives, so the wives of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we see that the ark will contain 8 people, right? Noah and his wife, his 3 sons, and they're each has a wife. Okay, verse 19. And every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Very important distinction there. That God's like, hey, Noah, just a reminder here, buddy. Make sure, I'm telling you to take 2. Make sure you bring a boy and a girl, okay? Because we need to make more of these later on. All right. So now we see that God has told Noah and his family. So the 8 people are on the ark, plus 2 of every kind of animal to be on the ark to repopulate later. Okay, of the birds according to their kinds, and of the animals according to their kinds, and of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind, 2 of every sort shall come into you to keep them alive. All right, so we're seeing that God has instructed that 2 of every kind. Now it's very important to understand the word kind, right? A kind of animal is a type of animal that can reproduce with the same kind. You can't take a dog and have a dog reproduce with a gorilla. Those are 2 different kinds of animals. There aren't dog gorillas floating around, right? But you can take 2 wolves, right? And those wolves can have babies, and those can have babies and stuff, and eventually you get to a chihuahua somehow, right? I mean, you could technically take a chihuahua today and breed it with a wolf, and you could have a wolf chihuahua or whatever, right? Or like with livestock, right? You can take a horse and mate a horse with a donkey, right? They're 2 of the same kind of animal. They're different animals, but they're the same kind, and they can conceive and bring forth, right? When you take a horse, a donkey, you get a mule. And so we see that God has instructed Noah that you're not bringing, the specific different animals. You're not bringing a Labrador and a Chihuahua and a Great Dane. You're just bringing 2 dogs, a boy dog and a lady dog. And the rest of the descendants of dogs beyond that are going to come from those 2 dogs. So, 2 of every kind to keep them alive. 21, very important. Also, take with you every sort of food that is eaten and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. So, not only does Noah have to take all these animals onto the boat, 1 of each, right? But also food to feed them, okay? They're going to be on this boat for a little while. And not only food to feed them, which, again, all the animals at this time are vegetarian. The lions are vegetarians. The bears are vegetarians. The dinosaurs, and yeah, Noah took dinosaurs onto the ark, they were vegetarians. Probably important to know, we don't get this in the text, but how did he fit all those animals on the boat? Well, number 1, the ark is very big. All right, the ark is huge. If we use the calculations from like our size people today, like an 18-inch cubit, the ark is the equivalent of 522 full-size train boxcars. That is a lot of room. Okay, so could you contain the different kinds, specific kinds, not each individual kinds of animals? Sure. You could actually fit them in there. Would it be tight? Sure. Is Noah taking the big, giant, full-grown ones? Probably not. He's taking younger, immature animals because he's going to want them to reproduce more. You're not taking grandma and grandpa elephant. You're taking the younger elephants so that they can reproduce, the smaller elephants. So it's more compact in size, and also they have a longer lifespan to be able to reproduce and repopulate after this thing is all said and done. So they're taking enough food for them and themselves. Everybody's still vegetarians at this point. Verse 22, last verse of this chapter. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. Here's Noah, this guy who's walking with God. This seems like a crazy request. But the summary of this chapter is in verse 22, is and Noah did it. Noah was obedient. God said, listen, this is coming. This is what I want you to do. I want you to get the animals onto it. And Noah obeyed. Noah didn't say, well, God, what about, I can't, God. No. Simply, Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. Father, we thank you for your word. Help us to grasp, we as humanity, we're not good, God, but you love us, you made us, and you want to put your spirit in us and change us from the inside out. God, help us to grasp that. Help us to be obedient like Noah. Help us to, when you tell us to do something, that it can be said of us that we did it. We did everything you commanded us. It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.